Today, my guest is Troy DuMoulin. Troy DuMoulin is Vice President, Research and Development at Pink Elephant. He's an author, an industry thought leader, and is an integrated ITSM champion, Agile Scrum Master, COBIT, LITP, OCMP. Troy, who has an extensive background in executive IT management training and consulting with over 30 plus years experience, is considered by many to be one of the world's foremost ITSM experts. As a leading IT governance and service management authority, he has exceptional expertise in Lean IT and DevOps. Troy is also a published and contributing author for multiple books, including being contributing author to the Integrated ITSM System, ITIL version 2, version 3, version 4, and on topics such as Lean IT, the Service Catalog, and ITSM. A frequent speaker at IT management events, Troy was named one of the top 25 industry influencers in tech support and service management by HDI. It is my pleasure to have Troy with us today. So let's start. Hello, Troy. How are you today?
I'm doing great, David. It's awesome to be with you here today.
Thank you very much for having accepted my invitation. That's really an honor for me to have this possibility to discuss with you on this podcast. And thank you once again to accept my invitation. So, Troy, you for those who don't really know you, you will have now time to introduce yourself, because I know that you are, I would say, one of these giants of the service management industry. So you work for Pink Elephant for a long time. Can you just introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely, David. So I'm the Vice President of Research and Development for Pink Elephant. And yes, I've been working with Pink Elephant almost 27 plus years now. And I've been part of the service management community for a long time. As you've mentioned, part of the role that I play in what I do is part of our mission. We research, we document, we promote best practices, plural. And in that context, we often get involved in the communities of practice where these frameworks actually evolve. And over the decades of doing this, I've actually been a contributing author to ITIL for 2, 3, and also part of the architect team for 4. Where the value system conversation comes from. I was a big part of that, but I'm also a COBIT author, a Lean author, an Agile and DevOps speaker. So I've been involved in many of the, using a Hamilton reference, the rooms where it happens. And I've had the privilege of working with a lot of people like yourselves who are also passionate champions of service management.
Thank you. Yes, I'm not sure I'm a champion, but I'm anyway passionate, and that's why also I'm here, and I really. Once again, it's really my pleasure for having you today. So you just mentioned the service value system, as part of the ITIL 4, which was like a kind of very important move from this service lifecycle to the SVS, as we say, and the service value chain. Yep. Can you tell me more about that and why you wanted to introduce this service value chain and the service value system as a core of ITIL 4?
Absolutely, David. So there's a couple of different reasons why this became a very big topic, and it became a big topic for myself and our colleagues way before the evolution of ITIL 4. It was largely because of what we observed as the failure mode for IT service management in general across our industry. Much like everything we did, we basically identified areas of improvement, and then we compartmentalized those, and we created teams to work on incident and problem and change and release, and they would all go do that in separate groups on separate tools. And in essence, we created more process silos. We actually reinforced silos with process. We made it worse with best practice. And so taking this a la carte approach to any IT management process was detrimental to the entire potential for success. And so as I was at that time struggling with why are these failing all the time? Why are we being so challenged with the effective use of service management, which by the way, we still are to this day, 30 years later, most organizations can barely spell incident management, right? In fact, I have a belief that we've regressed in this, not improved in our service management journey. That's another conversation for the day. But at the same time as I was thinking about this with various people, I was also deeply invested in the idea of systems theory, systems thinking, Peter Senge, the fifth discipline. I was also being introduced to lean concepts with the genesis of a book called Lean IT, which came out in 2011. And I got to meet some really cool people in that community, Stephen Bell and Michael Orzen. And I contacted them. We started to talk, and I got invited to be a participant in Stephen's next book called Run, Grow, Transform, all about lean and how it's adopted. And what I learned in that context was something that wasn't new. It's been around for literally generations. The idea of systems thinking applied to management frameworks and operating models. And there's a set of terms that it's important to understand. Is a value system, a value chain, and a value stream. And those are not synonymous terms, but they're related. And they connect to this IT management process context. And the whole reason to kind of think about it that way was to understand that none of this works in isolation, that everything is connected to everything. And we began to talk about integrated service management. And because we teach all of these other frameworks, Agile, Lean, DevOps, organizational change, leadership, we had to find a way to synthesize all of it. And using that systems thinking mindset, we began to talk about and lean heavily on those terms. I'm very happy to kind of tie those together for you, but that's why systems thinking and then lean concepts were so important to me at the time, and why I was a major voice, one of two actually of the 12 architects, that says we need to show this as a system.
That's a very clear explanation. And the first one I I had about the service value chain and the service value system that I'm teaching for now more than 4 years. So thank you for that. It's never too late.
And I can connect those words for you because they're very important to connect. Would you like me to do that?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay. So all organizations are systems. They're connected set of resources for combining to accomplish a shared goal and a shared account. To understand that systems thinking is incredibly important because you understand it as connected. In fact, there are two primary human skills to consider: analytical skills and synthesis skills. They're both required human skills, but they're opposite. Analysis is the idea of taking the bigger thought and concept and breaking it down into individual pieces. Right? We use analysis, as you well know, as for critical problem solving. Mm-hmm. Synthesis is the opposite, where we look at all of the component parts, we see how they connect, and we see the bigger picture in their relationships together. So when you think about the average IT professional, would you call them more analytical in their paradigm, their thought? Would you call them more systems thinking people, big picture people? How would you describe the average IT professional? Analytical or synthesis?
Yeah, definitely analytical.
So here's the problem. When you apply this analytical mindset to a tightly coupled system, you're fooling yourself, because you want to believe that each component part is mythically isolated and disconnected from the other for its convenience and its political, organizational silo premise. But the reality is you're in a tightly coupled system and want to pretend like it's loosely coupled, and that leads to more problems than actually it helps. And so to even describe these management processes together, you have to first start believing that it's an entire system. And the system thinking has three primary attributes. It's holistic. You have to believe and understand and have empathy in the bigger, because if you don't, then you'll make wrong decisions. It's dynamic, it's constantly changing, so you have to do short feedback with learning. Welcome Agile. And it's closed loop. Everything connects to everything. So as you begin to have this belief system, is what it is, to understand that nothing is isolated and everything connects to everything, then you can't approach any given IT management process or tool with this belief system as you do you and I'll do me. You got asset, I got change, and she's doing incident. That paradigm is the primary reason of failure of service management over the last 3 decades of my life. Siloism. Now, every management system, because we think about systems for a minute, a set of congruent parts that basically work together for a shared goal. We can think of a management system in ISO 20000. We'll call it a management system, because that's what it is. Or we can talk about a technical system. That's the component parts that comprise a product and or a service. But if we don't take a systems mindset to either the management system or the technical system, bad things happen. We overlove on the application and forget the rest of the system components to the detriment of the product. We focus on one process and we think, oh, we don't have to worry about the rest of it, to the detriment of the system. So it's a false belief system to break it down into an analytical approach. Analytical is great for problem solving, but it sucks as an architectural metaphor. So to even begin talking about individual processes, you first have to believe it's a system. And if you don't, then go away, because you're going to make it worse. Now, we have this management system. Let's talk about chain and stream. Now, imagine all these things, by the way, come from lean manufacturing. I'm inventing nothing. They've been around for literally generations. We're just adopting them into our paradigm of language and thought. A system is the whole congruent, set of things. A chain goes down the middle. So you basically think about like a linked up chain, coming through the middle, where you have some intake channel, whether it be strategy and relationship management or catalog or even operational in the context of a service desk. So it's coming in, demand is being received. And as I take that demand and now progress it towards the actual hands that need the value delivered, anything in the midpoint of that system that's actually progressing the baton through the relay race to the end, that's a chain. The system is not just the chain, it's bigger than it, because there are capabilities above the chain for governance, for strategy, for vendor management, for finance and revenue. There are capabilities underpinning the chain for continuous improvement, security, assurance, and risk. And so you have both the value-added activities coming through the chain, but also the indirect supporting activities above and below. So the system is important. The chain runs through the middle, and a value stream is simply a series of activities anywhere in this chain that basically accomplishes a task. And so to understand how to think about chains and systems and streams, you have to understand this kind of taxonomy. And now I understand that to do anything is going to connect multiple business processes through the chain, guided by governance, assured by, risk, and all of that has to work as a congruent whole. And if you don't think this way and you have this paradigm of she's got chains and I've got asset, well, you're just reinforcing the stereotype we've been struggling with for decades. It's not safe to talk about an individual process without thinking through a systems thinking and a chain perspective.
That's a very great explanation. I really like it. I have a tricky question for you. Because you just explained in a very, very clear word the system, so the service value system. If I'm stacking in ITIL 4, okay, the chain, which is the service value chain, and the service value streams, which are, created to address the demand. Yeah. The interesting thing in ITIL 4 is that your service value chain is the service value chain is based on 6 predefined activities. You know them better than me. Another question, why these ones? Because honestly, if I recon these activities, I said, oh, these are activities related to the service lifecycle.
Okay, so first let's talk capabilities.
Yeah.
A capability is a grouping or affinity grouping of a series of areas of processing competency that collectively do something similar. So we have upfront kind of engagement capabilities, strategic, tactical, and operational. We have kind of above, strategy capability. Below, we've got the improvement. In the middle, we've got the plan, build, and then run on the other side. In fact, the idea of the value chain is nothing new, because we've been talking for generations again about the idea of a plan, build, run operating model. Every organization by definition, has that set of basic activities. We receive it, we plan it, we design, we build it, we move it into production in a non-invasive way, and we get to operate and underpin it with assurance and improvement. So all we have in that context is simply the application of a literally concept that comes from the 1940s, modernized, but grouped into these affinity groupings. You see the same thing in COBIT, right? When you think about COBIT, they have all these processes and they're grouped into various affinity groupings. Well, this very concept is not unique as well because it's called a capability map or model. And Charles Betts just announced his most recent capability mapper model. It's a way to think about organizational capability, agnostic to structure, agnostic to tools, agnostic to individual process. And how you string those capabilities up, that's through the value stream conversation, but they're groupings. Now, who came up with the namings of the groupings? Ultimately, Axios did, right? So we had input. And the initial pictures that were on the whiteboards and the drawing boards were a lot more complex. And the marketing team says we needed a simpler set, so we need to kind of combine these. And some of them got combined, in my opinion, well, they shouldn't have been combined, but the reality is it's simply there to show us you can't think about these things as separate. You have to think of them as collective. And if you don't enter that conversation like that, then the rest of what you're going to learn is going to be dangerous for you because you'll actually make it worse.
That's very good. I think that I will have to visualize this interview with you many times.
So here, let me give you this thought, and this is what we're talking about at Pink Elephant. Pink Elephant right now is integrated service management, the idea of bringing all these things together. But the reality is applying a systems thinking mindset to IT management process is an organizational change activity. You cannot come at any individual process without first thinking through the idea of our conversation so far. And if you don't, you will fail.
How many organizations on Earth are prepared for that?
This is the problem. We still struggle to this day with a fundamental problem with silo-based culture. And I've written a paper on that. It's coming out next month. The reasons why we have silos, and silos are still propagated. In fact, things like configuration management are impossible with our current mindset of analytical. Because while we design systems as systems on blueprints and UML models, and I know you have something to do with that because you have studied UML in the background, right?
Yeah.
We design a system as a system because you can't build it without the systems mindset. But then the moment we put it into production, then we forget that it was a system, and now we manage every domain as if it's an isolated component part. Because our data management strategies replicate our organizational structure, which is based on task specialization and division of labor, which comes from the early 1900s. And so we have individual data sources because we have organizations that are focused that way. And so the idea of a configuration management system is incapable or impossible for an organization that doesn't think of itself as a system. We'll do asset management, but we'll never do a configuration management system until that organization acts and behaves as a system and has a data management strategy which is systems oriented as opposed to domain oriented.
Good.
It's a cultural restriction which is established by leadership because your culture is led for. And so if you have a silo-based culture, it's because you led for a silo-based culture. If you want a collaborative systems-based culture, you have to have a leadership that leads for systems thinking, integrated service management.
And do you have examples of organizations, I would say, would be like the vitrine, or where we could, let's say, get some inspiration of how it would look like?
Yeah. So a lot of those organizations come and speak at our conference. That's one of the wonderful things about a conference. We see case studies that say we've got this figured out and we're starting to move in this direction. And they begin there by recognizing the need to understand that there are multiple frameworks and there is no single framework that tells the entire story. Whether that's a comforting thing we'd like to hear or not, it's not true. You need different frameworks for different approaches. But the way you synthesize them is important, because what typically happens is when we think about frameworks, best practice, publications, and models, what we see more often than not is that organizations will be divided by culture and silo, so they will also use books in this way. In fact, most organizations will use reference models and bodies of knowledge as weapons to basically reinforce their right to be independent silos. I'm doing DevOps, you're doing Agile, and she's doing ITIL, and they're doing integrated something over there, and they're doing architecture, TOGAF, and they've got IT for IT over there. And so we literally weaponize these books to reinforce the right to be left alone in our silos. That's broken. And that's the key message at Pink Elephant we're trying to espouse in our integrated service management system idea, is that you can't not take a one book philosophy, because if you do, you're just reinforcing this false belief that there's one book to rule them all, which is the antithesis of systems thinking.
Yeah, that's good. Very good. I was thinking also of, I have two other questions related to the value chain. One is about what you have on the left side, and one is about what you have on the right side. The left side, you have the demand, a demand or an opportunity. For many people, the difference is not obvious. Demand and
I can answer that.
Yeah. So that's, and of course there is a sub question. I'm French, so if I said I have two questions, you can expect more than two.
Allons-y.
Let's say that you have the difference between the demand and opportunity, right? The second thing is, I didn't understand, honestly, from studying ITIL, and I do myself to study it quite well, where I have the feeling that all these demands are input from this SVS, okay, or opportunities, right? But you never see how and if they are challenged somehow. We take that for granted, and I want your view on that, because when in Agile we say, okay, you have to embrace change. You have these product owners, they prioritize things, but nowhere you say, okay, this is bullshit. This is not valuable. Your demand is not right, or we already have something that could help you. Just use what you have. It's not perfect, but it makes the job and it saves a lot of money for our organization. So, two questions: the difference between demand and opportunity. Is there any something in ITIL related to changing the demand?
So the first question. So let's just understand what demand management is first. A demand is simply an ask on a service organization for some activity and or product and or service. I need something to happen. And we can have strategic demand, capital investment type demand. We can have tactical demand, which is, can I have an enhancement to this application, or I'm having a new employee start, can we onboard them? And we can have operational demand. It's broken, please fix it. In demand, there are three basic activities: demand capture, demand forecasting, and demand influencing. This is getting to your second question, right? I first have to have a channel for understanding the intake, and it has to be a discrete, compelling, and reasonable channel that people want to use. Otherwise, your demand comes in all over the place, and it's difficult to create transparency, inspect, and adapt, right? So you have to first stabilize and understand your discrete channels for demand capture and the roles engaged in that relationship management role, which are multiple in the context of strategic, tactical, and operational. But then someone has to own that process and or capability to understand and be able to forecast future demand in the context of preparing and improving and expanding or even retracting the area of capability based on forecast. That's planning. But there's also the idea of influencing, because the customer isn't always right. And there are four voices in Lean that are inputs to demand, not just one. In Lean, we understand there are voice of customer demands, which is the thing the customer needs us to do. Agile would call it a feature or a function. But we also have voice of business, which in this case means the voice of the service organization itself, not the larger brand, the service organization as a business. Then there's voice of regulation, which is, of course, regulatory and compliance. And then there's voice of process, which in Agile and Lean is simply a continuous improvement term. Retrospective, software refactoring, technical debt reduction. So any given owner of anything, a process owner, a product owner, has to understand all four voices. We always start with the VOC first, voice of customer, but we can never stop there. So any backlog of work that has to be prioritized have to be balanced across all four sources of demand, not just VOC. And sometimes voice of regulation or a dependency from voice of business, it has to be done first, or a technical debt consideration has to take precedent and or create restrictions and or boundaries for VOC. Start there, but we can never stop there. Now, there's also this idea of opportunity. Let's use a classic role of a business relationship manager, all right, in the context of a conversation with a point of contact within a business customer. That conversation is going to take a 3-point agenda. First point is, here's how the current services are going that you currently are subscribing to us. Here are your incidents, here are the current requests, here are the projects. This is a check of actual against forecast, the plan versus the actual. That's the first part of the conversation. It's supported by a service level management kind of identification, a dashboard, because I can have objective conversations about how's it going. It's called the servicing part of the conversation. Then the next part of the conversation is, oh, by the way, where are you going and how can we help? This still is capturing demand at this point, right? What are you thinking about? What are you planning on doing? All right, so we have that part of the conversation. The third and final part of the conversation is there's this really cool technology emerging. I think it would take us to the next level on our strategic plan. We're working on this project over here for another line of business. Would you like in on that as a part of the pilot group? And so this is me now not just receiving demand, capturing demand, but bringing back potential opportunities that the customer didn't even think about. You see, Henry Ford once was quoted, if I only asked my customers what they wanted, they would only say faster horses. So to be a partner requires you to both have an idea of your own and also push back when the other voices have to take precedent. Now, this speaks to a maturity level of relationship management roles, because I can go from order taker, yes sir, yes ma'am, whatever you say is true, to kind of a coordinator, to a trusted collaborator, to a strategic partner. Well, there's no pushback at the order taker. That's me, the friendly person behind the McDonald's counter saying, there's the menu, what would you like? And yes, and my answer is yes. But as the organizational relational role goes from this order taker to coordinator to trusted collaborator to strategic partner, you're going to expect me to have a voice and opinion and also have a great understanding of all four voices. But that would mean that the relationship management role knew what it was trying to do, had a catalog of services that actually could refer to as the existing services on the table, and also have other roles like product and service owners to bring to the table when it was an off-catalog conversation. What I've just described to you, David, is not the maturity of 80% of the organizations who can barely spell incident management.
Great. That's perfect. It's really, 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 really cool. I really understand what you said. And now the other questions related to the right part. I have the strong feeling that when we look at the service value chain, when you say, oh, let's say the service value chain, you have the demand as an input, and then you have the value as an output. I would say that it's a shortcut.
It's a shortcut.
Yeah, because in fact, you don't have value of the service value chain. It's just simply not possible. You have possibly results, outcomes, but you cannot possibly have value. Am I right?
So value is in the eye of the beholder, and it's based on the experience of the outcome, right? And so I can give you an outcome you don't value. Now,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
value is
Yeah.
a set of adjectives or description around the outcome. And so the outcome simply is the idea of a demand being processed through this chain, supported by a system, and you get something on the other side. A pizza is delivered into your hands. That's an outcome. Now, that pizza may not be valued because of three primary attributes of value that Lean teaches us since the 1940s: quality, speed, and cost. And so, by the way, those weren't invented recently by any given book. They have been the basis of value for 100 years. And so
That's
I
what we
might have
call
had something to do with
innovation.
this as well, David. So the idea of an outcome, let's talk about quality, because that's our favorite thing to talk about, has two basic aspects. That's functional and non-functional requirements, right? The thing
Yeah.
you're getting, the pizza, does it have the right ingredients on it? Did you get the right pizza? Right? That's
Yeah.
an element of functional requirements being met. Now, non-functional requirements was the person who delivered your pizza, polite to you? Did you have to go through all kinds of hoops to figure out how to order your pizza? And when you actually get the pizza, is the box easy to open and is the thing easy to cut, or did it not come pre-cut? And so there are many non-functional quality things that say, did I get the pizza I wanted? Am I having a good experience? That's why experience management is a hot topic right now. But there's two other key things. Quality is not the only aspect. The next one is cost, because there's always an economic aspect, is did I get a good deal? Because if that thing that came was quality was great, but I feel like I'm overpaying by factors of X, I'm not getting value out of it because I'm being forced and my hands are being tied and I'm being shoved in this pizza in my mouth because I'm told I have no other choice. And it's 3 times more expensive than I know I can buy it down the street. And by the way, I think it's better down the street. So there's always an economic exchange, whether you think you got a good financial deal. And if I didn't, regardless of its quality, I think it sucks. Third aspect, I say it's great on quality, it's the right ingredients, and you were helpful, and the ordering application was, swift and automated, and it's a decent deal that I can compare and contrast. But if it's like 2 hours later than I expected, take it back. I've already gone and bought another one. In fact, now I had to pay for it twice because I had to do it myself, right? Or buy it from another vendor. It's called Shadow IT. And I'm still paying you. So now the economic context even sucks more. So
Yeah.
while you got me my outcome, the pizza, arrived at my door, I don't think it's valuable on multiple factors. And each of those factors could basically say, I'm thankful, but no thank you. I'm going to another dealer and I'm going to, do it myself. And that's any one of those could contribute to shadow IT, as we call it. By the way, these 3 dimensions are the same dimensions of project management: on call, on time, on budget, with quality.
34 on time,
right?
in full, on budget. Yeah.
And
I
so
know that.
this is value as it has been since the pyramids.
Yeah. And do you think, because then now there is a kind of, and that will be my last question, because I could talk to you for ages, but unfortunately we have limited time to talk together. Maybe we'll have another session if you allow me to invite you again. Last question about that is, to which extent, you were talking about silos and all that, but I would say that let's take the example of an organization where you have an internal service provider, an internal IT department working as a service department, as a service provider, in many cases. This IT department in many organizations is a silo on its own in comparison with the rest of the business. And honestly, you know that major banks, they always have their nice fancy offices, and then in the other part of the city, they have a kind of bunker or data center where they have the IT guys. It was like that for ages, and I saw that not so a long time ago. Now the question is, if you have this kind of silos that exist, okay, do you think it's worse for the IT department or for the service provider to be engaged in converting this outcome into value? What is their role in that equation?
Let's talk about the idea of governance alignment and strategy alignment.
Yes.
All right. So we can use Scaled Agile as an example of this, because you can talk about the fact that you have these value streams that should sound familiar at the business and or government level. The business value streams are simply the major areas of capability that are flowing through a brand. And there's a strategy process of evaluate, direct, and monitor. Where do we want to be one day when we grow up, and how did that now compare to where we are? Target state, current state. We direct what we're going to do next because we can't do it all. We're going to do this and this and this, and then we monitor whether that's happening or not. So this evaluate, direct, and monitor, which sets up a portfolio and a backlog of work that needs to be done, gets translated down to what Scaled Agile calls a solution backlog, which in our world is a service portfolio and product lifecycle backlog. And so now the IT service provider, as an internal service organization, has to take that direction. Governance is always giving its direction, boundaries, and guardrails and resources to the next level down. And now we take that and we say, okay, in that context, that's VOC, by the way, only. We have to think about the other three voices as well, the things we have to do VOC, the regulatory and the improvement. All of that now has to be put into our solutions backlog as a rank prioritized, set of things to do in context of dependencies and all of the above. And that's not always VOC first for many different reasons. Now that solution strategy conversation gets translated down to program and portfolio governance, because now I'm setting direction, setting boundary, and setting guardrails and resource constraints. Now portfolio, which is now in the world of project space, right, which is going to be down into program and project, we'll then have to go through the EDM. Here's what we're going to do around the project itself, relative to the portfolio, relative to the solution, relative to the value stream, and how we're going to then think about what we're going to do first, second, and third, a work breakdown structure, and how we're going to monitor progress in the Gantt chart or the burn down chart. And then that project now ranking and prioritization governance gets set down to the team level backlog in the context of what is the given team going to do at a product owner, which is part of product strategy, which is part of solution strategy, which is part of business strategy. Now, not only do we have now cascading governance levels and backlogs all setting priority, we have a set of roles that are actually connected to each level of that system, because this is a system. And for this to work, that cascading understanding of governance and the roles that connect on a relational level have to be in place. And if they're not in place, then everyone basically thinks that value equals busy. That's not a lean concept. Just randomly doing things because we think it's the best without any kind of congruence to product strategy or overall business organizational roles is not going to necessarily give you value. So again, one of the critical success factors for this would be to have linked up governance levels that have each their own output of strategy, which gets translated down to the next level down, and then the roles to connect that whole system of management, because we're talking about a management system here. And if these things don't exist, which again, 80% of the organizations that you probably work with don't, then everyone is basically trying to figure out what to do locally without any influence or input and insight from any higher authority.
Yeah.
Welcome to chaos.
Yes, that's a very great demonstration. Yes, I really appreciated that. We are now nearly coming to the end of this podcast. So I would not be more than grateful for what you've just said to this podcast. It was for me, it was really interesting. You are, as I said in the introduction, you are one of these giants of service management, and I really mean it. Do you want to say something, maybe for just one minute left, if you want to say something about the topic that is related to what we saw or what we talked today?
The biggest transformation in my life, David, as a service management professional, is when I understood the idea of systems thinking and lean that had its genesis of systems thinking, actually. As I was exposed to lean thinking, lean principles, lean values, everything else made sense. It was like, if you just understood these truths, there is no trying to convince anyone of any given management framework or book, because these are just means to an end of a shared goal, which is based on the principles of lean manufacturing, which, by the way, are the same principles that drive Agile and DevOps. In fact, talk to Gene Kibb or anyone, they'll say that Agile and DevOps are love children of lean and lean manufacturing. the same principles that drove the quality movements of the 1980s are the ones we're rediscovering right now and simply putting our own labels on.
Great. Thank you very much. We come to the end, and it was my pleasure to have you on this podcast. And I wish you the best of luck for your role in Peak Elephant, and I really hope that it's not the last time we talk together.
It's been my pleasure as well, David. Thank you for the great questions.
Thank you very much.